Thank you for tuning into Literary Blend, a publishing podcast. I'm your host, Demi Michelle Schwartz. There's no perfect recipe for chasing a dream in the publishing industry, but I hope the conversations on this show give you the ingredients you need to bake yours into reality. So let's flip the page and get into this chapter of Literary Blend. Hi friends, welcome back to Literary Blend. Today's chapter is called Running a Kickstarter Campaign for a Literary Project. And joining me on the show to cover this topic is Marx Pyle. Hi Marx.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to chat all about Kickstarters with you. But before we get into that, I would love for you to share a little about yourself and your journey in publishing.
Oh, sure. I've always enjoyed storytelling since I was a kid, whether it was role-playing games or comic books or books or TV shows, whatever. At some point, I went to, after doing a couple more practical degrees, I went to film school in Vancouver, British Columbia. I did filmmaking for a while. And then I decided I wanted to make some stories that didn't require budgets. And so I went to Seton Hill University and studied popular fiction and writing, and to learn more about the business of writing also, and then founded Cabot Crossing Publishing a few years back, and been going ever since.
Awesome. Perfect. So I'm super excited to dive into our chat about Kickstarters because you've done a few. And so, just for anyone listening who isn't really familiar with what a Kickstarter campaign is, can you just give them a brief overview of this before we get into the details?
Yeah, it's a crowdfunding campaign or platform. Um, there's a few of them out there, like Indiegogo, and there's a major competitor for Kickstarter called BackerKit, and a bunch of other stuff. Different ones specialize in different areas. Kickstarter is pretty broad, but about creative, original products, including books. And it's where people who might like to support your work, might want to get your work, or maybe they're really interested in certain niche, genres or type of media. They can go there and they can support your work. They can pay you directly and get bonus awards, and you can crowdfund your campaign. So people do it for movies, TV shows, books, obviously comic books, role playing games, all sorts of stuff.
Perfect. So we will chat about the rewards later, but first, I just want to get your thoughts on when an author should do a Kickstarter campaign. There's obviously a lot of costs involved, especially for small presses and authors who self-publish. So can you give some insight into the benefits of running a Kickstarter campaign?
So I would probably say before you try a Kickstarter, you need to build your audience a little bit first. At least publish one book, or at least some short stories, something out there to get some interest, build up a newsletter or something. Um, because when you start a Kickstarter, it helps to make sure you got like a certain percentage of people are probably going to back you, to at least give you kind of a starting boost. Because what you don't want to do is go on Kickstarter, launch, and then you don't get that boost, and then the algorithm, it's always algorithms, right? Will be like, oh, no one wants this, and then no one sees your Kickstarter. So now, when I say that, doesn't mean you have to have a lot, but you need to get started a little bit first before you worry about the Kickstarter as much. But the Kickstarter is great because it can help you pay for those expenses of a cover, of an editor, of whatever, maybe formatting your book, whatever stuff that you can't do yourself, and you can raise those funds through Kickstarter. It's almost like they can pre-order the books in a way. It's a little bit more than just that necessarily, but that's kind of what they can do is like your concept, support you as a creator, and give you some money to bring that concept to life. It's not impossible to do if you haven't published anything, but I would say that it would be easier for you if you publish at least a little bit of something first. So.
Yeah, that's perfect. I really like how you mentioned that and having some sort of an audience first because you're going to want people to back you. And I think this is just space to kind of emphasize how important it is to start networking and building a platform now, even if you're not published at all yet. Down the road, if you're thinking about maybe running a Kickstarter for one of your books, or just in general, like any path of publication you take, you're going to want an audience, you're going to need a platform. And so I see some authors often, asking questions like, I'm not published yet, I don't have an agent yet, why would I start building a platform now? Why would I start searching for readers now? And that's just because you need to start building that following, that platform. So when you do have something to share, you have people who will read your work and support your work. And so it's never too soon to start connecting with people in the industry, readers, and just building that platform.
Yep, exactly. And especially like for a Kickstarter, let's say I run across your Kickstarter, never heard of you before. And if I read your bio and you've never published anything, then I'm like, I don't know, would I like your writing? Will you really finish this project? Because some people don't finish their Kickstarters. And there's everybody who backs Kickstarters has a nightmare story where they never got something they paid for. so so you want to show proof that you're legit. You got something published. You got something out there at least. When I say published, it doesn't have to be like traditionally published. It doesn't even have to be a novel. It could be like blog posts of snippets of your story or something. Just something to show that you've been active and that you're building up those connections and stuff.
Yeah, that's really important because essentially you're asking people to hand over some money to help support you. So you need to give them a reason to do so beyond simply liking your concept of the book. So my next question for you is when it comes to setting the goal. So for the one we did for Enchanted Tales and Twisted Lore, the goal was I think it was like 1,000, but then we massively passed that. But like when it comes to choosing a realistic goal, because it isn't for Kickstarters, it's all or nothing. So if you don't hit that goal, then you don't get anything. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So in that instance, you need to be realistic with setting the goal while also recognizing that you need to cover certain expenses. So what advice do you have when it comes to choosing what number to set as the main goal? And then we'll talk about stretch goals in a bit.
Yeah. You want to find that balance where you're getting a goal that you feel is attainable, but also make sure that gives you everything you need to make your project a reality, right? The last thing you want to do is get your goal and then you don't have enough money. Like maybe you just barely got that goal. And then you're like, sorry guys, it's going to take a while longer. And that's not good. I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen before. So, so you want to find that sweet spot where you can cover, and really that's what you should aim for. You should just aim for whatever it is that you need. You want to give yourself a little bit of buffer space. You need to keep in consideration that Kickstarter is going to take a certain percentage of it, and the transaction fees that happen, because you're not going to get all that money sent to you directly. They're going to take that piece out first. You also have to keep track of taxes. You have to pay. You may not have to pay all your taxes on it if you're able to show proof of your expenses and stuff. To do that in your taxes, but you need to keep that in mind. There could be taxes, especially if you don't get it completed in the same calendar year. And then you need to keep in mind that I would say like 5 to 10% of pledges may not go through. So there's a situation where like people put in their money, they put in their credit cards in for their pledge, and it's a promise that they're going to pay it, but they haven't actually paid anything yet. And so whenever the pledge goes through, if there's an error on their credit card, or if they put in the wrong information by mistake, whatever, you may not get those funds. Sometimes there's people that troll a little bit too, and they'll go in there and they'll just make something and they don't expect to actually pay it. I don't know why do people do that, but some people do. So I would be safe is assume 10% of your pledges may not go through, and then you keep in mind whatever the percentage is of that Kickstarter is going to take out, and then keep a little extra for taxes just in case. And then whatever that goal is, that's your sweet spot. That's what you want to get, because you're covered, and it shouldn't be, especially for a book, it shouldn't be too terribly expensive. So I see that with other projects or even books, I guess, where sometimes people are like, oh well, one person gets it and then their two friends get it, and then they kind of get kind of silly about daydreaming about, I'm going to make $1 million, and It's like, no, you're not Brandon Sanderson yet. so, um, so you want to keep it realistic, and the great news is it doesn't have to stop there. More money can come in, and actually, what I always tell people is like, well, all you got bonus money basically after that for everything. I mean, you still have your expenses and stuff, but you can go as far past that goal as you want, and the sooner you hit the goal, the more likely you'll go really high because it's a great buzz thing. If you get within a day or two, whatever, it's real great social proof that this is a hot thing, and you'll probably see it, go two, three, four, five times whatever your goal was at that point. But if you set your goal too high and then you struggle to reach that goal, and it takes maybe like half the campaign to reach that goal, your momentum really dies out, and you'll struggle to get more pledges after that.
Yeah, a lot of great information. And so if you hit that goal, you can keep going and going, but you do have the opportunity to include stretch goals, which will continue to encourage people to come back and maybe change their pledge, give more. And it's just a way to continue to stay active with the campaign, even if you hit that goal early on. So this kind of brings me to rewards. So for the one we did, there were a lot of super, super fun rewards that really got people motivated and excited to back the project. So, can you give some insight into what kinds of rewards you can offer to get people to back the project?
Yeah, it's an assortment of ones. I mean, the basic thing obviously is the book, and you can put in acknowledgments to the backers in the book. That's a really cool thing to have your name in a book, you know, for people, and it doesn't cost you anything extra to do it, um, and to show that appreciation. But other cool things include I like Tuckerizations a lot, and they're usually pretty popular. And that's the concept of where you name a character after someone, um, or base them off on someone in some way, and that those are pretty popular ones. You can charge a little more. It's really a great, memorable. Sometimes gift. I know at least one or two of them were that I don't always know, of course, but sometimes I have conversations with the backers because I'm trying to figure out what name to put in there and all that stuff. Um, but I find out that sometimes they're gifts that they gave to someone else for the Tuckerization. That's always cool. Um, and so they're a great gift to give people, and that's a really fun way that again costs you nothing to do, um, and it doesn't have to be a big part or anything. You also have we have what else do we have? We had some editing options there. We had um, some of the authors volunteered to do signed copies of some of their books, so that was really cool. We also, of course, have the stretch goals you mentioned, like digital wallpaper, and in this particular case, with this anthology, you also could unlock more stories. And once we hit so many stories, we actually make 2 volumes, in which we did. We unlocked all those. Um, Audio commentary bonuses were great. One thing you'll notice here, except for the bookmarks that we did, all of them really they cost time but no money. So, and I think that's a really important tip for people. People get really caught up on the merch and be like, I'm going to make these, Enchanted Tales and Twisted Lore T-shirts and hats and coffee mugs and stuff, and those are cool. But then it's like you gotta there's an expense of making them. You usually have to do them in bulk to make them affordable. You have to ship them to you and then ship them out to the backers. There's a lot of expenses basically, and if you're not careful, you end up. I know people, at least in the early days of Kickstarter, who were like filmmakers and stuff, where they actually lost a little bit of money in the end. I mean, because they just got a little carried away and forgot about shipping.
Yeah. A lot of great insight again. I thought ours was very fun, super diverse in terms of the rewards. And I think that worked extremely well for an anthology because in the case of Enchanted Tales and Twisted Lore, it wasn't one author trying to get somebody to or people to back their project. There were several of us who were promoting it and offering different things. And so I definitely think like a project like that where you have multiple people involved could have the potential of being more successful just because you have a bunch of people promoting it instead of just one. But for authors who maybe are just doing their solo book, do you have any advice for them? Because they're not going to have the kind of big team of people who is pushing the project.
Yeah. I would say, like we said, first time, make sure you build up your platform a little bit. Then be a lot, but a little bit. Have some. If you have a newsletter, have some people in there that at least maybe it doesn't really matter what number necessarily, but let's say 50 people or whatever, just some people, and have a little bit of a social media presence and stuff. Before you get started, just so you have something to reach out to. Now, Kickstarter is pretty good about organic discovery, at least when it first starts, which is great. It's really hard to get on a lot of platforms. So that would be nice, but you can't rely on it completely. I would do a pre-launch page at least a week in advance, really push all your followers and your friends and your family to that pre-launch page so you can see that how much interest there is. And hopefully you convert all those people really quickly to your Kickstarter. And then I would not get too fancy with your first one. I would just focus on getting your book out, or books, whatever the collection is, and try not to overshoot too much. Get whatever you need for a good cover, and then save the stretch goals or the higher tiers that you're trying to reach for maybe that really awesome illustrated cover that you would love to get, but that might be a lot of money, or or um, or if you want bookmarks or something like that, leave that for a high stretch goal. So if you hit that, it's great, but at least you get your books out. I would also suggest, kind of like what we did, is for books. Can't do this with everything, but with books, I would have the book written at the very least in your to the point to where it can be edited at the very least, because then your turnaround isn't too long, and then you have samples and you have more to talk about with your book. It's not just a concept; it's written. You can mention sections. You can give excerpts and stuff. You can have people, other authors or whomever, read it and maybe give a little blurb about it that you can put there to promote. Um, but don't do like a novel. There's no reason to do this with a novel where you're just like, here's this novel and you'll get it a year from now. That's too long. There's no reason to do that. Um, and you're setting yourself up. Like if you haven't written the book yet, oh my goodness. I mean, come on. We all know authors that said, I'm writing this book, and then something happens and it doesn't happen, right? Or it doesn't happen for
Yeah.
a year or two, right? That's enough pressure already without having like, hey, people gave me $2,000 for this book, and now I got to try to make it happen. That's a bad position to put yourself in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in general, I mean, you've done a couple of these now, so you know all the planning that goes into this behind the scenes, really getting everything sorted, and not only just so they can get the book in time or like not ridiculously late, but also just from a professional standpoint. Like if you're trying to do a Kickstarter and you don't have the book ready and your kind of whole presence is like kind of all over the place, it's not going to encourage people to support you. What you guys did was like absolutely perfect because it was just so professionally presented. Everything was all sorted. We knew exactly what was going on, and there weren't any like red flags or anything like that. And so I definitely think like plan it out, know exactly what you're asking for, make sure the project is, like you said, doesn't need to be like ready for publication, but at least draft it and in the editing stage where you'll be able to get it to the backers in a realistic time frame. So you've done a couple of these so far, and from the last one for Enchanted Tales and Twisted Lore, did you learn any lessons from that one that you would apply to another Kickstarter in the future?
Yeah, I think so. I'm still kind of in that post stage, where I break it down to numbers and stuff. So I'm not completely done looking at that. But what I think a few things I would have done is the way I broke out the two volumes. I would have done it a little differently. I think I would have just made it two volumes out of the gate, made them smaller, and broke out the collection that way, maybe by certain theme with each one, and then unlock the stories, like taking turns. Like you unlock the story in volume one, you unlock the story in volume two, and that kind of thing. I think that would have. The reason why I say that is until I unlocked volume two, I couldn't, put it as a reward, right? And so once I unlocked volume two and gave it as a reward, I feel like we lost potential sales because some people already got the reward and then they didn't come back to get the second book necessarily. Um, some people did, but it's more difficult to get somebody to like back reward. It's really hard to get somebody to come back and add more to it and stuff like that, or change their reward pledge. So I would have done that differently. I think it would have helped Volume Two get a lot more pledges for it and stuff. Um, but I had no way to know that until I tried. so, um, so if you have multiple books, so I guess my learning lesson there is like if you're going to do like, hey, I have a book, but I want to make 3 books. I would be careful about getting too crazy in your first Kickstarter. But B, I would say if you know you're gonna do that, put them all in the Kickstarter together and kind of do a staggering, like beyond the first goal of whatever things you need to do to improve it. Like I guess if you're the only writer of let's say 3 books, like a trilogy, I might say get a quote for a cover that's the cheapest quote of good quality cover that you're willing to go for. Use that for your goal, and then for your higher goals, get a quote on somebody who's going to do much higher quality covers, and you have that to reach for. Um, and in that example, so I wouldn't go here's book 1, but if we hit this goal or stretch goal, I'll unlock book 2, and if we hit this stretch goal, I'll unlock book 3. Because I think now that I've done that, I'm like, the way the Kickstarter platform is built, I don't think it's ideal to do it that way. It's also extremely time consuming on my part, on my side, to like then rebuild those assets, and then you have to put them in on their back end in such a way and make sure you don't break anything and print them live and stuff. And so I was like, oh, why did I do it this way? So
Oh, well, it's good you learned some lessons for next time. And I think in general, it was super informative, just like from the author perspective, participating in this, because this is the first time I participated in one. And it was extremely successful. And so it was super fun to be a part of that and see it be so successful. That was a lot of fun. So, just to wrap up, what are some final thoughts you would like to share on running a Kickstarter for a project?
um, yeah, I would say once you build up your platform a little bit, don't be afraid to give it a try. I mean, the worst case, it doesn't succeed. I mean that's no fun, but it didn't hurt anything if it doesn't succeed. Um, the only thing that would hurt you in a Kickstarter is if you succeed, but then you can't fulfill the reward. That will hurt you. Because then you'll never be able to do it again on that platform. Uh, because you'll burn your clients, and Kickstarter will kind of earmark you. And so make sure you're ready. Make sure, and that's why it's really important. Go ahead and write the book first before you do this. I think sometimes writers really look for validations, or they look for outside pressures to make that happen sometimes for them if they haven't published a lot yet. And you don't need that pressure. So don't put yourself in that situation. But Kickstarter, crowdfunding in general, because there are other platforms. Indiegogo, you don't have to hit everything. I think it's 80% or something. Uh, there are variations. You might like one of those better. It may make more sense for your project. But I would give it a try, because what I really like about it a lot, and why I think I'm going to continue to lean into it, is that it's a great way to connect directly to uh, customers and future fans in a way you can't do on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. You get to interact with these fans. You get to hear from them. You get yeah, you just like I add them. So I ask in the survey, like, would you like to join our newsletter? And I would say usually 40 to 60% of everybody says yes. So you're building up your platform too for future books using crowdfunding in a way that you can't do on Amazon. Somebody buys your book on Amazon. I don't know. I got some money, but I don't know who it was. So, you know, maybe I'll get lucky and I'll look in there and try to click the website, and maybe then they'll click my newsletter thing. Probably not. So, so it's a much more effective way to build up fans and to get higher percentage of money directly to you, not to a middleman. And I think it's a great way for authors and for other creators too to really fund their projects. So.
Yay! Perfect. Great note to end on. This has been super insightful and fun. And this brings us to your plot twist, where I got to ask you a totally random question. Are you ready?
Oh, okay.
All right, this is super random. All right, so what I'm going to do I'm going to give you two genres, and I want you to tell me what kind of bird you think best fits the genre.
Oh my gosh. All right, I'll try. I'm not great at my bird species, so it might be limited.
All right, your two genres are horror and fantasy.
Horror and fantasy. Well, for horror, you got to do a raven.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Oh my gosh, you can really kind of do a fantasy too, especially with Game of Thrones. But let's pick a different bird. Let's pick for fantasy like, gosh, I can't think of. Trying to think of something cool. If it's dark fantasy, a vulture. Let's say that.
Perfect. Awesome. So, just to wrap up, can you share with everybody where they can connect with you online?
Yep. You can find me specifically at marxpyle.com, but you can find kind of like what we just talked about, the Kickstarter and Cabot Crossing Publishing over at cabotcrossing.com. That's Cabot like rabbit with a C. It's a cat rabbit hybrid. If you ever heard that little folklore story or urban legend. And you can check out all the books there at cabotcrossing.com. And we also have a YouTube channel. You can go there too. I'm also kind of big into tabletop role-playing games and stuff. The YouTube channel has a mix. It has a lot of that too. So in case you get confused when you go there.
Yeah.
We may or may not publish some RPG stuff in the future. Who knows?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you.
You're so welcome. And listeners, that is a wrap on this chat with Marx, all about running a Kickstarter campaign for a literary project. If you enjoyed our conversation, please consider leaving Literary Blend a review and giving it 5 stars to help others just like you discover it. Also, if you have friends in publishing you think would enjoy the show, please pass it along to them. Thanks for listening, and until we flip to the next chapter, happy reading and writing.